It's Tuesday, that means it's time for another top 10 video. Let's try going with monsters again. This time I'll give you my top 10 monsters from Volo's Guide to Monsters. You want to see what those are? Stay tuned. Simple rules. They have to be in Volo's Guide to Monsters, and they can't be NPCs, just monsters. Number 10. Number 10 is the Firenewt. I don't really have a good reason specifically why I put this on my list. I just think they're really cool. And if you know anything about me, I do typically like to I enjoy playing unique races in Dungeons and Dragons throughout my D&D career. That means playing things like goblins, playing things like kobolds. So I seem to really like to play these sort of lesser mob-style monsters, but as a player character. And the Firenewt really falls into that category, although we unfortunately don't have statistics for how to play a Firenewt in 5e, although I would love to get that option. There's nothing too crazy. They're immune to fire. They live in areas of high volcanic activity or areas of extreme heat. And they're basically, it's interesting because, right, we have salamanders, but this is a Firenewt, so it's like a lesser version of a salamander. But all of them have the ability to spit fire, so not only can they pose a threat to your party in mob scenarios, and again, fire is a very common damage type for blaster-style characters, so they'd be immune to it. They can do 2 attacks with multi-attack, but they can also spit fire. Although the range is only 10 feet, the damage is 2d8, and as a challenge rating 1/2, facing a couple of these at low level could prove to be difficult. And they have some cool lore about riding these kind of giant bird creatures and being warlocks, specifically to other fire-based gods. Number 9. Number 9 is the Froghemoth. I like amphibians, reptiles, that kind of thing. I've always been a big fan of toads and frogs and salamanders and all that since I was a kid. And when I was given the option, I've had fun playing around with low-level characters about them fighting a giant frog, because it can be pretty nasty depending on where you are in the campaign, and the swallowability of a giant frog at low level is interesting. This is like a giant frog on steroids. I mean, it is a massive CR10 creature that, I mean, just look at it. It just looks cool. It's got, 4 tentacles for arms. It's got this long, sticky tongue, 3 eyes on the top of its head. It's resistant to fire and lightning damage, but if it does take lightning damage, it has a couple of side effects. But it can grapple people, it can pull them in, it can swallow people whole, dealing acid damage. It's just, it has a bunch of grapple abilities. I don't know, it's just like a tank, and it's a good way to soak up some damage, and if you pair this with something else, it may prove interesting. Not too much is really known about, I don't have too much to talk about lore-wise. It says they're not of this world. I got to imagine that it says Lum the Mad, a journal purportedly written by Lum the Mad said cylindrical chambers of metal buried in the ground from which Froghemoths emerged, but no reliable reports of that location, which makes it sound more like they're aberrations from a different world rather than a monstrosity. It also mentions, I like bullywugs too, right, because they're frog people. Again, I have a weird obsession with strange races to play as characters. But we've got bullywugs here. Bullywugs can worship a Froghemoth or protect it. So between fighting a bunch of bullywugs and a Froghemoth, that can prove to be an interesting combat. But yeah, in my mind, I like to think that the same guy who developed, the same wizard who thought it was a good idea to make owlbears, may be the same guy who helped bring the Froghemoth into existence. Number 8. Number 8 is the Kirin. This is sort of the celestial creature, kind of the golden scaled unicorn. I know they have some presence in some Eastern culture, but it's just interesting to get a new celestial. We don't actually have that many celestial creatures in all of Dungeons and Dragons. It doesn't come up too much, but it's we usually get in these monster books typically a bunch of evil or neutral monsters, and this is a wholly good personification of good. It's like a unicorn, but with even more powers, right? It's a 9th level spellcaster, can resurrect people from the dead, has all sorts of crazy powers. It talks about how they bring boon. I mean, this is like a good fairy tale style creature. It comes through the town and brings good fortune to everybody. People could beseech it for like wishes or things like that. And I've never really messed with the idea of their layers and their lair effects. I also really like using them as a potential patron for a Celestial Warlock could be an option, or possibly someone who doesn't know any better may worship one as like a god if they're a paladin or a cleric. They're just a unique creature, and I think they're cool, and giving them more presence in 5e is never a bad thing. Number 7. Number 7 is purely me being a DM and enjoying other creatures. So I've had a lot of experience with older editions. Okay, I've said many times, primarily 3.5. But I like reading through old books from older editions and finding obscure monsters to try to convert them to throw at my players in 5e because they've memorized the monster manual. One that I had found in my travels was the Death Kiss, and I was going to make stats for it for my 5e game, but then Volo's Guide came out and it's here. So it's an interesting like a vampiric beholder. You can see clearly here it's got the one central eye stalk, it can float, but rather than having the stalks with eyes on it, sorry, it's one central eye, not eye stalks, but it has basically these weird octopus-like tentacle sucker pads on the end of each of its hands, its tentacles, and it can drain blood from the creatures. So it's immune to lightning damage, which seems random. If the creature takes lightning damage, if they hit it within melee or with piercing or slashing damage, it can make 3 tentacle attacks. Up to 3 of these attacks can be replaced with blood drain, 1 replacement per tentacle of grappling creature rate. So it has 20-foot reach on these long tentacles here, 3d6 damage. Grapple a huge or smaller creature, and while they're grappled, they're restrained. And a grappled creature, it can use the blood drain. They make it con save. They take 4d10 lightning damage, and it regains half as many of those hit points. So it's a lesser beholder. It states it right here. It might come into being when a beholder has a vivid nightmare about losing blood instead of magical iris. That's also something, if you don't know, that I thought's really cool about beholders, right? Beholders can dream other beholders into existence. If they dream of a beholder, it manifests. So in this situation, they're saying if a beholder is dreaming and has a nightmare about losing blood, it might spawn a death kiss into reality. So yeah, it's interesting just to see the idea of it pretending to be a beholder. It says it lacks the combat finesse and intelligence of a beholder. But yeah, it's just an interesting switch on a typical beholder, and it's like a weird vampire, and you could probably work that into maybe a vampire utilizes a death kiss as like a minion to provide blood to it. Maybe the death kiss is a weird hybrid between a vampire and a beholder. I just think there's a lot of interesting uses for it, and plus they just look cool, and the minis for them look even better. Number 6. Number 6 is a Neothelid, and again, there's a lot of interesting aberrations in Volo's Guide to Monsters, so that's what you're going to see a bunch on this list. But if you're unfamiliar of the process of cerebromorphosis, which is how mind flayers make more mind flayers, they basically take tiny little tadpole worm things that swim around in the pool with the Elder Brain. And if you've seen the new Baldur's Gate 3 kind of intro where the person turns into a mind flayer, they basically like take one of these tadpoles and implant it into the mind of a humanoid creature, thus that creature undergoing cerebromorphosis and becoming a mind flayer. But the Neothelid concept is this, I mean, it's a big, nasty looking, gross worm thing. Challenge rating 13. But what that is if an Elder Brain, say, dies in a Mind Flayer colony, all those tadpoles will fight for dominance in food, and one of them will ultimately become the survivor that eats all the other ones. And then if it continues to survive on its own and continues to grow, it could grow into a Neothelid. It also states here, which is kind of interesting, that it's a taboo in Mind Flayer society to allow one to mature without implanting it into a donor brain. And then it basically, if it survives long enough, it becomes this crazy monster. Challenge rating 13. It can sense the presence of any creatures with intelligence scores of 4 or higher. It has psionic abilities. It can levitate. This thing is a massive gargantuan monster thing, but it can levitate, cast confusion, feeble mind, and telekinesis. It has the tentacles that come out of its mouth that deal 3d8 bludgeoning damage plus 3d8 psychic damage. It can grapple a creature. It can swallow a creature, rather. And then you can deal with the whole being dissolved kind of thing, taking 10d6 acid damage. And it can also spray acid breath in a 60-foot cone, which is 10d6 acid damage on a failed save. It's just like, I feel like any scenario where you may be implanting like a purple worm or something like that, this could be an interesting concept to change it up. Or if you're, again, thinking like maybe something really good happens and heroes in your world kill a mind flayer colony, but they didn't think to kill all the little tadpoles, and one of them turns into a Neothelid, and that's something they have to deal with later on. Number 5. Number 5 is the Deep Scion. And first of all, these things just look absolutely terrifying and badass. I mean, look at that. That crazy, disjointed maw that splits open there. That's like some serious horror movie stuff. Reminds me of the Reavers from Blade 2. So, what a Deep Scion is basically someone that gets lost at sea, stolen from shore, and they enter into some strange pact with a very powerful underwater force, and they transform into this creature. But you see right here, they're a shape changer, so they're able to transform back into the creature that they once were to do whatever it is they need to do. Or it says here at other times they take on new identities. It's a Deep Scion's duty to infiltrate the air-breathing world and report back to its master. When set to its task, a Deep Scion worms its way into a life of an unexpected enemy as a new best friend, an irresistible lover, the perfect candidate for a job, or in some other role that enables the minions to carry out its master's command. And what's even cooler is one of their common masters is a kraken. So you could have like a scenario where you're on a coastal city and Deep Scions are infiltrating, and you don't know who's who, invasion of the body snatchers, but they all report up to a kraken, which is cool. So they can do this kind of swim. They have a swim speed, dark vision out to 120 feet, and they can change form, right? Use an action to polymorph it to a humanoid piscine hybrid form, which is what we see here, hybrid form, or back into its true form. Its statistics, other than its speed, are the same in each form. Any equipment it's carrying isn't transformed. It's amphibious in its hybrid form. Excuse me. I guess that is the hybrid. In humanoid form, it takes 2 melee attacks. In hybrid form, it can make 3 melee attacks, 1 with its bite and 2 with its claws. So it's got some battle axe attacks there. Bite does a d4 plus 4. Claw does a d6 plus 4. But it also has Psychic Screech. Scream audible within 300 feet. Creatures within 30 feet of it must make a wisdom saving throw or be stunned until the end of its next turn. In water, the Psychic Screech also telepathically transmits the Deep Scion's memories of the last 24 hours to its master, regardless of distance, so long as they're in the same body of water. So again, a very cool infiltrator, who's the bad guy scenario, and then ultimately a super crazy big boss at the end. Number 4. Number 4 is the Banderhobb. And if I'm being honest, I got a pretty sweet Banderhobb mini recently, so that's helping to drive this. But as I've stated thus far, I'm a fan of toad and toad-like creatures, and the Banderhobb is basically a giant bipedal toad, but there's a lot more to it than that. I'm also surprised it's not a fae or fiend, as more often than not, they're birthed by hags, which is kind of cool. Right, so hags can undergo a ritual to bring one into a business. Some say dark fae and other powerful fiends know this process, as do few mortal mages. You might be able to find one on how to tome on how to make one, which then could be, again, a whole plot thread for a lower level campaign. But what's cool is it attempts to carry the bending of whoever births it, so it can be a minion for somebody. Or potentially, if your party finds the ability to make one, I guess they could make one to do their bidding as well. And then here, legends tell of a dark tower in the Shadowfell where shadow sometimes reforms and Banderhobbs roam. They're also like preternaturally quiet. You can see shadow, stealth wall, and dim light or darkness. Take the hide action as a bonus action. They mention a lot above that it's very good at being quiet, but I don't actually see that it reflected in the stat block other than the stealth proficiency. If the Banderhobb has even a tiny piece of a creature or object in its possession, such as a lock of hair or splinter of wood, it knows the most direct route to that creature within 1 mile, so it's like a good tracker as well. Its bite does 5d6 plus 5 damage, so that's nothing to joke about, and it can grapple and restrain with the bite. Its tongue does necrotic damage, and if a strength saving throw will be pulled towards it. It has a swallow ability, and it can magically teleport up to 30 feet to a non-occupied space in dim light or darkness that it can see. Before or after teleporting, it can make a bite or tongue attack. And honestly, it also reminds me of that one episode of Power Rangers, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. I'm sure some of you know which one I'm talking about, with a weird like toad creature that eats the Power Rangers. This guy kind of reminds me of that, and that's also probably another reason why he's on the list. Number 3. Number 3 is a Shoosuva. This is something I feel like I often overlooked until I was kind of going back through to look at the monsters for this. And if you know anything about me, I really like gnolls and Yeenoghu and that whole concept in my games and just in general. And a Shoosuva is a fiend, a demon specifically granted by Yeenoghu to gnoll warbands or a specific gnoll, maybe a Flind or a Fang of Yeenoghu. And it says right even there at the top, each Shoosuva is bonded to a particular gnoll and fights alongside its master. A gnoll has been gifted with a Shoosuva, second only to a Flind status within a warband. So it in and of itself is challenge rating 8. It's got the typical demon resistances of cold, fire, lightning, bludgeoning, piercing, slashing from non-magic. Immune to poison. It has rampage, so when it reduces a creature to 0 hit points with a melee attack, it can make a bonus action attack, a bonus action to move half its speed, and then make a bite attack. Its bite attack does 4d10 plus 4 damage, and then its tail stinger, which has a reach of 15 feet, can do 2d8 plus 4 piercing damage. The target makes a con save or become poisoned. While poisoned, they are also paralyzed. So between that plus a 4d10 bite, and if you're paralyzed and they hit you with it, then you're going to be looking at an auto crit for 8d10 damage, which could be pretty nasty. Plus, they look like a cool white hyena scorpion hybrid. Number 2. Number 2 is a Mindwitness. What's better than a Beholder or a Mind Flayer? A Mind Flayer Beholder. So what a Mindwitness is a Beholder. We talked about that ceremorphosis process or cerebromorphosis or whatever it's called, where Mind Flayers implant a tadpole in the creature, in the brain of a humanoid creature or some sort of thinking creature, and then it transforms into a Mind Flayer. Well, if they were to stun a Beholder and bring the Beholder to the colony and go through that process, a Beholder becomes a Mindwitness, which is this creature, which, as you can see, is only challenge rating 5, so not as strong as a full-blown Beholder, but it does still have some abilities. So it is telepathic. It has it can make 1 bite attack and 1 tentacle attack. The bite is 46 plus 2. The tentacles are 48 plus 2 psychic damage, and they're grappled and stunned. And it's an intelligence saving throw, or be stunned until the grapple ends. And then it has its eye rays. Shoots 3 of the following magical eye rays at random. Aversion Ray, DC 13 Charisma save, or have disadvantage on attack rolls for a minute. A Fear Ray, DC 13 Wisdom, or be frightened for a minute. Psychic Ray is DC 13 Intelligence save, or 68 psychic damage. Slowing Ray is a DC 13 Dex save, or they're basically affected by the slow spell for a minute. Stunning Ray is same thing, but be stunned for a minute. And the Telekinetic Ray lets it move people around as though like a telekinesis spell, and they are restrained. And again, just the concept of taking 2 things as dangerous, or again, if you really want to play that up, Beholders are not supposed to be like an easy thing to beat. They're tough and they're difficult. They have a lot of cool powers. But in your game, a Mind Flayer was so powerful, or a group of Mind Flayers were so powerful, they overcame a Beholder, and then Beholder became their minion. So what does that spell for your party? Plus, again, it just is a cool concept to see other things being turned into mind flayers or mind flayer type creatures rather than just humans or humanoids. Number 1. And number 1 is the Alhoon. Alhoon is an undead mind flayer creature. And I really like the concept of the Alhoon, as much as I like to use the character as it is as the monster to fight. But for those of you who don't know, mind flayers are forbidden by the Elder Brain to pursue any kind of arcane spell casting of any kind that's not psionics based. So if one decides they really do want to pursue arcane spellcasting as an avenue, they're basically exiled and cut off from the Elder Brain. So they can undergo a process to essentially become a lich to prolong their own life, and that's the process of what becoming an Alhoon actually is. So there's a little more information here in the block text about that, about how they go through the efforts of becoming an Alhoon and becoming undead and turning away from psionics completely. And then a little bit more about, what kind of things they can do, because they're not technically a true lich in Alhoon, so they can be killed and they won't come back, but there are some magic items that they can craft themselves that will help prolong their long life. And there's also a very interesting here, the variant, which is probably even better, is the Neothelid, which is just really cool to say. So an Alhoon is an undead mind flayer with some powers, and a Neothelid is a true mind flayer lich. So here's what it says. It's a challenge rating 22. It takes deep speech and undercommon, test telepathy. So start with a lich stat block and then make these adjustments. It has magic resistance and innate spellcasting psionic traits, as well as tentacles, extract brain, and mind blast action options. So long as a mind flayer lich feeds captured souls to its phylactery, it maintains the muscular power of its tentacles and the ability to extract brains. And then it has its legendary actions down below here. So, again, what's more dangerous than a mind flayer or a lich? A mind flayer lich. So, I just really enjoy saying a Neothelid. I also threw an Alhoon at one of my parties recently, and I did a pretty good number on them and really helped to put them in their place, because they were kind of steamrolling a bunch of stuff, and this really took them down a peg. So, anyway, that is my top 10 monsters for Volo's Guide to Monsters. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you do like this and want to see more monsters videos in the future, please let me know in the comments, or feel free to leave any other comments for future top 10 videos that you'd like to see. I have a running list from suggestions from all of you, but if you have other topics you think you'd like me to cover, or that I should cover in the future, I will try to do so. As far as future monster books, canonically, all we really have is Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes, really, at this point. But I do have third-party resources, like the Tome of Beasts and the Creature Codex and things like that. So if you'd want to see what my top 10 monsters from those books are, I can definitely go over that if that's something you're interested in. So if you haven't subscribed to the channel, this is a great opportunity to go ahead and do so. We are just shy of 20,000 subscribers not just shy. We're about 500 away from that as of the time of me posting this. But it'd be really cool to hit that. I was hoping to get close to this around sometime in July, and it's not even halfway through February, and the channel's really been blowing up, and I really do appreciate all of you coming out to show support for Nerd Immersion and all the stuff that I try to do here. So again, ring the notification bell if you want to stay up to date on things that come out on the channel as well, and I'll be back with more top 10s next week, and be sure to stay tuned to the channel for more other content like DM's Guild reviews, Fixing It series, Nerd Immersion's Guide to Everything, all that kind of stuff throughout the rest of the week. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.